Can you put your phone on mute? Your
All
phone
right.
on mute.
Let's give it a second to boot up, but I think we should be technically live right now. If let's give it a second. All right, it's on here.
Wow.
Okay, let us know if you guys can hear us.
Go, go,
Go, go, go. You're live.
Bingo.
Bingo. Wow. This is so cool.
It's your first time ever doing a live stream?
Yes, it's the first time.
Nice.
Now I realize I'm nervous.
It's okay. These are always very interesting. Oh, let me turn this volume down.
Should
So
we
you
bring
guys
the
can hear us
camera?
okay too? We're set up here with a different mic to go with this. You're saying it's a bit laggy. I'm gonna move this a little bit to this way as well.
Maybe do you want to move it closer to us? A little bit. Daniel brought out the fancy light. It says it makes us look prettier, so we might
I
as
don't know.
well
There's
come
very
closer.
little. There's very little you can do with this. So sounds good. Audio 5 out of 5. Video 3 out of 5. Yeah, we were trying to set up our external camera here, and we couldn't get it to work. So right now we're just using the camera right on the laptop. But we were actually planning on doing our first ever News on China episode. Live, not necessarily live. We were going to record it, and then we just decided, you know what? Let's not do a News on China today. Let's do what we usually do. Every time Tings and Marco comes down, we just hang out at the brew pub here, and we just have casual chats about anything. And I said, why don't we just do that? Let's just go in having no idea what we're going to talk about, and just have a bit of a conversation with the audience. So that's what we're going to do here today, and hopefully answer some of your questions at some point too. But I guess we could just start talking about, you know, every time we get into a conversation, we never really talk about kind of the more personal stuff we do or our backgrounds and stuff like that. So maybe that'll make things a little bit more interesting for people who watch our show and wonder a little bit of the backstory. So, I mean, how about you guys start with when you came to China and you're kind of getting into all of this news stuff and looking at the propaganda and, you know, what drives you guys?
Can we do a cheers first?
Yeah, let's do that. We need to sip of this. We're drinking the high-level Wu Mao beer.
Yes. Red.
It's afternoon, so I think that's technically okay. If we were recording in the morning, we'd have a bit of explaining to do.
And it's very hot today. It's 46 degrees real feel
Oh,
right
it is
now in
crazy.
Shenzhen.
It is crazy out there.
Ooh.
Yeah, and so you guys just flew down from Shanghai.
Yeah.
You said it's about 5 degrees cooler there, but
Still hot.
But they don't have this though.
No, they don't have it.
no.
Yeah.
That's why we came to Shenzhen.
Yeah, we came for the beer. Daniel was just the treat.
So before we get into just the different things we've been looking at online and whatever comes to mind, you know, I think people probably get the sense that you're equally frustrated about some of the anti-China propaganda, and it's probably what pushes you to, you know, create some of this content to kind of set the record straight. So can you tell me a little bit about that, about, you know, the catalyst or like what it was that got you saying, you know, we really got to say something about this?
Sure. Do you want to start?
No, go ahead.
I mean, it's interesting because, for instance, one of the things that triggered news on China, I remember we were still in Brazil. We were sort of starting to move to China and organizing things. And that was like February last year, 2020. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that shocked me at that point, remember at that point was more like Hong Kong, the story was still mostly about Hong Kong and lots of fake news. And of course, because we were already following a little bit of Chinese politics and I mean, have friends here. So it was clear the amount of fake news that was being brought in the media, even in Brazil. But what actually shocked us was to see that some very progressive, I would say even leftist media outlets in Brazil, there's some nice ones, either podcasts, websites, YouTube channel. It's actually a growing niche of leftist progressive media in Brazil. But then when I realized it was February, I remember I was doing laundry at our home, and I was listening to one of these podcasts. And then they started to say exactly the same thing that BBC was saying, or a New York Times. I was like, wait a minute, these guys are left. these guys know how the empire works. These guys know what U.S. does in the media when they want to come after a country or I don't know a group or etc. How can now they reproduce the same bullshit about China?
Right.
Which means okay, we know U.S. lies about everything, but about China they tell the truth. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But at that point, I mean, there's something wrong here. This is getting bad. Because if the left is starting to reproduce what the bullshit is talking in London on Washington, D.C., we're going to have a problem. And that was like 1 year ago. And now, I mean, things are even worse.
Yeah, I think, it's probably less surprising in Canada to see that leftist news outlets or leftist people falling for this kind of propaganda. But, I guess in Brazil and in South America and Latin America, you guys have been the victim of a lot of these propaganda campaigns.
Exactly.
So you would think that the leftists there would be able to see through it a little bit more, saying, "Now, we not only have we seen this before, we've been a victim of this before."
Absolutely.
Yet they're just falling for it.
Yeah.
It really is frustrating. I think it actually goes one step further. I think there's a lot of, I know this is a bit of a conspiracy theory-like thing, but I think there's a lot of people who go onto YouTube who present themselves as leftists. They say, yeah, sure, the U.S. is bad. But then they spout all of the U.S. State Department talking points. Exactly. And it's almost like if it's a deliberate effort. Like we found out last year there were people like the Democratic Party were specifically paying influencers to help them over Trump and stuff like that. So this isn't something difficult to imagine, that there are YouTubers being put out there who will say, yes, America bad, but everything America is saying about China is true. And it's like, well,
exactly.
Well, hold on a second. And it feels like a kind of like a Bellingcat kind of thing. I don't know, like a fake version of WikiLeaks where it's like they throw you a bone once in a while and they say, all right, okay, we're going to admit some bad stuff is going on in the U.S., but when it gets to the really important stuff like empire maintaining level propaganda stuff, okay, no, everybody's on board with this. No, we have to say that this is what happened. We have to say Cuba back. Cuba's the other thing that's going on too.
Sure, absolutely.
How people are trying so hard to say like, oh, it's not the sanctions, it's their regime. What's the point of the sanctions then? If you don't think they're going to work, if you don't think they're going to cripple their economy, what do you think is going on? And then the amazing hypocrisy of talking about having no real quality images of police cracking down on protesters to the same level that American police do. And saying that they're going to put more sanctions in place because of the crackdown on peaceful protesters, talking about human rights from a country that has a torture camp on Cuban soil, where on an American-controlled section, they are literally waterboarding people. And they're talking about holding the Cuban authorities accountable for cracking down on peaceful protests.
That's crazy.
No, I mean, the Cuba thing is quite something dear to us, of course. I mean, we're looking at 60 years of sanctions. I mean, if you actually total that, you're talking about hundreds of billions that have cost that economy just in sanctions. But the thing is, what have they consistently done? I mean, Cuba has, like most socialist countries, have actually outperformed any other Western countries, capitalist countries, in terms of its response, despite the fact that it has such limited resources. I mean, medicines, we know this. Medicines, syringes, can't get in. You can't get basic food into because of obviously the sanctions. And it's been said, spoken by U.S. officials since day one. This is to squeeze Cuba so that there is no food there, so that there is no medicine there, so that we can foment enough hate that then the Communist Party will fall. But for 60 years it still hasn't. But what's incredible is not only have they kept the rates of the COVID down pretty significantly in terms of the deaths and cases, the entire treatment, everything has been free. So they basically have rediverted the limited funds they have gone severely into debt just to make sure that happens. But of course, that's not the story you ever hear about.
And they have 2 vaccines already approved. 2 vaccines for COVID.
And they have 5 candidates, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
So, for an island of 11 million people.
Exactly. With 60 years of sanctions, they have no food, but they still can do vaccine.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, and people, when you're talking about the idea of crippling them and creating discontent so that people rise up against their own government. I mean, that's the stated goal of these sanctions. Yeah. People who are working in the Biden administration have admitted this in their own books.
Absolutely.
In the art of sanctions and things like that. And so
They've done zero to reverse, what is it, the 243 additional sanctions that were put under the Trump era, and then Biden has the courage to say, I stand with the Cuban people.
Yeah.
You know, when remittances are being banned to enter the country, when medicine is prevented to come in the country, have they done zero to remove even the worst of, of the Trump era sanctions that were added on top? Like 243 additional measures were added during the Trump era.
Yeah.
It's something
I think,
sickening, actually.
Yeah, I think, and this goes back to the unfortunate situation where you have Brazilian leftists who aren't seeing through this. For me, the value in seeing this, like when seeing the Hong Kong protests unfold and see how misrepresented they were by the mainstream media, when I see what's going on in Xinjiang, this is almost kind of personal to me because I have lots of friends in Hong Kong. I have a Hong Kong ID card. My kids were born in Hong Kong. I have friends in Xinjiang and stuff like that. So I get a bit feisty on my Twitter and stuff like that. You guys have probably seen that. I go after people. I hold them.
Notice.
Yeah,
I feel like you're really calm demeanor.
No. I think somebody called me like the bulldog or of the going after these propagandists.
Yeah,
but
wolf was not. I don't know.
yeah,
it's
wolf
enough.
warrior. Yeah,
Bulldog warrior.
but I take it personally. But now what I've done is I've taken my lessons from seeing how this unfolded in Hong Kong, seeing that they're trying to push people in Xinjiang back down into poverty by taking away their jobs. Apple has already announced that they're not going to hire Uyghur workers anymore because they're afraid of the accusations they're going to get. This is exactly what they hoped for.
Wow.
There was an extremism problem in Xinjiang. You don't we have living evidence today. You can see the ETIM fighters fighting in Syria today, destabilizing towns, going through beheading Christians or beheading Muslims who don't go and pray on Friday. Like, this is all in front of us that's being ignored. But what it's going back to my main point, what it's allowed me to do is step back and look at propaganda that exists in other parts of the world in a far more objective way.
Yeah.
I almost was kind of, when I saw firsthand this propaganda against Hong Kong and Xinjiang, the biggest offensive thing to me was not only how they were trying to, the Western media and Western powers are trying to destroy these places, not trying to help them, was that I felt cheated that for so long I trusted kind of mainstream media, and it just, and I'm starting to go back and looking at all these things I just took as fact, and I'm like, well, hold on a second. And even I had the opportunity because I grew up being told about the situation in Guyana when my mother's country, when Chetty Jagan was elected, he was a little bit too socialist leaning, and the U.S. and the British governments went in and destabilized the country by creating a race war between the people of African descent and Indian descent, and basically destroyed any hope of that socialist movement. And so I grew up knowing that happens, but still I was like, okay, but my first few years in China, I was still thinking, I was still somewhat believing the Western narrative on China, even though I was living here and seeing for myself that it wasn't true.
It's too strong, man. This is,
Really strong.
This is how many, like 80 years of Hollywood. That's the point. Even we know that, of course, U.S. is not as strong as it was 20, 30 years ago. But when you look to the so-called the soft power, the power of Hollywood, the power of the narratives coming from West, it's so huge. This is not something that is going to just disappear.
Yeah. The Department of Defense works directly with Hollywood. They've literally admitted this on their own Twitter page to make sure that the military is depicted accurately. And they'll interject in, for example, like the Hulk movie. They wanted to create a program name which was a military program that created the Hulk. But the problem was in the original script, they were going to use a code name which is related to real chemical warfare that America used in Vietnam. And they're like, oh, no, please don't use that one. Because that actually is related to one of our atrocities. And I don't want to bring attention to that. And they changed it for them because if they want access to military equipment and, aircraft carriers or weapons and things like that, they got to play ball.
Yeah.
They got to play ball, and the Department of Defense will say, okay, you got to cut this scene out, you got to rewrite this, you've got to reword this, and it's completely crafted for them. Hollywood is behind this. You look at the importance of Cuban kind of or Latin American rappers and Pitbull coming out to support this, like,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
These are shills for empire who these institutions have them in their back pocket. Ashton Kutcher is now on board as well.
That's true.
I think more more of what happens in Miami will determine the future of what is happening than really what is happening on the island in the terms of the narrative.
In Cuba, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were
creation.
literally using photos of protests or rallies in Miami and saying that it was in Cuba. And when you zoom in on the street signs, you're like, this is not Cuba. This is this is in Miami. And when they do show, Fox News was showing protest photos of in Cuba, they blurred out the boards that they were holding up because they were supporting their government. They were anti-protest protests.
Mm-hmm.
They were protesting against this, interference. So it is so, and people sometimes they just look at this and they're like, oh, no big. Yeah, they don't even click. They don't even say, hold on a second. They're blurring something out here. What's here? And this is what people should be asking and paying attention to more.
This is kind of an aside, but a nice little tidbit we learned from a friend last night. So any Nintendo game players, back in the old days, there was a Nintendo game called Cuban Heroes, or at least that's what it was translated in Chinese.
Yeah.
It was a Nintendo game where, because we're just on the eve of the July 26th, which is the anniversary of the July 26th movement, which is the guerrilla movement that helped bring Cuba to revolution. Anyways, sidebar, there used to be a Nintendo game called Cuban Heroes where you can fight like Cuban, like, guerrilla fighters in the Sierra Maestra.
Yeah, you were Che or Fidel, and you
Yeah,
were like,
but what's hilarious, so our friend here actually grew up playing it, but that, of course, was banned in the U.S., so that's why, probably in Canada as well, that's why we
and
probably
probably
never
in whole
heard of
Latin
it.
America, because in Brazil I never heard about this, that's the kind of thing. I mean,
the video games that really get pushed through, because video games are an important part of propaganda also.
Yeah.
If you look at Call of Duty, it became more and more political. In the early ones, you could fight from the perspective, you could fight the Nazis from the perspective of the Soviets, if I remember correctly.
Oh.
But later on, they kind of adjusted it where there was an it was, okay. I think basically they're moving towards this. The Soviets were just as bad as the Nazis,
Sure.
and there's an important part of the World War II story that is hidden from us in the West, and they do a really good job at it. Is marginalizing the Soviets' role in defeating the Nazis.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is one thing about. That was like maybe 2 years ago. I came to China and started to have, some connections here, and so I have this friend until today. She is like 27, 28 years old. She spent like 6 years Chinese, very well educated. She did like college and masters in U.S. And then we were talking, but she grew up in China. So we were talking about the Second World War. And I asked her, I was like, oh, but wait, who do you think won the Second World War? She was like, the Americans. I was like, oh, really? You don't know about the role of the Soviets? Oh, which role? Have you heard about Stalingrad, the Battle of Stalingrad? No, I never heard about it. And again, she grew up in China. But she grew up watching U.S. movies.
Right.
And how many movies is like...
You ask an average Brazilian, they're going to say the same thing. So I mean, this is the kind of
absolutely.
rewriting of history that happens on a daily basis.
Now, there were a lot of, correct me if I'm incorrect, there were a lot of Nazis that actually escaped to Brazil.
Oh yeah, more for Argentina,
In the
but
south.
we have a couple. We had a couple in
Yeah.
Brazil too. But it's crazy because if you think, even like how many people outside of China know that 20 million Chinese died in the Second World War, fighting against the Japanese, which were allied with the Nazis.
And more than that, actually because Japan was in the entire region.
Yeah.
And China actually secured, for the entire duration of, I guess, for 14 years of that experience, secured the majority of the Japan's whole military force, but never actually surrendered.
Yeah.
So you're saying that what if that force was unleashed into the rest of the region in that massive way?
Exactly. If the Japanese, the Nazis were here, Soviet Union, Japanese coming from the east, that would be, without China, the war would be lost to the Nazis and the Japanese.
So you don't hear about the 25 million Soviets people that died.
Yeah.
You don't hear about it ranges between 20 and 30 million Chinese people that died
Yeah.
at all in the history now of World War II.
And you know how many Americans died?
Oh, it's a small amount.
It's like a few, I don't know now, but it's like
It's very,
tens
lost
of
the number,
thousands
yeah.
maybe. But you feel that, oh my God.
Oh yeah, growing up in Canada, we that's what you think too. They were the heroes. And everything everything you watch reinforces that. You know, Captain America. You know, it's like I remember seeing on a forum. It was on Reddit or something like that, and this one really proud American. He says, "Name one character who could beat Captain America," and then somebody showed up and put in the comments, "Captain Vietnam."
No, I mean, this is another very interesting stuff, because since the World War II, how many big wars U.S. won?
Oh,
Name one. They lost Korea. They were beaten by Vietnam.
by the Chinese. A new PRC just formed 3 years
Exactly.
and goes into war.
Iraq, they destroyed the country, but they never controlled the country.
Yeah.
And Afghanistan, it's the same. So but if that's so powerful. Hollywood is so powerful that even when they lose the wars, you still
They
think,
win the narrative.
Exactly. You still
Yeah.
think they are the unbeatable army.
It's going to be really interesting to see how they rewrite Afghanistan as well,
Exactly.
because they're leaving as the Taliban are basically walking into these towns and taking over the majority of the territory.
Yeah.
And that's something I need to learn more about it. I'm going to be interviewing somebody on the topic of Afghanistan.
Oh, that's cool.
But when you look at it too, these are the clues you pick up on. It's like, okay, the Taliban, they have some pretty messed up beliefs as far as I know. I've got to look into that more. But they're not going in and taking a lot of these towns by force. They're walking in and they're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
They're like, we don't want to be ruled by this puppet U.S. government.
Yeah.
So now the U.S. left, and then what was it, yesterday or the day before? So they started bombing them again, bombing the Taliban to try to keep them back. So they're not leaving a stable country that has a government that they want in power, who has control over everything. The other thing that was an eye opener for me was Syria. So these people went out, they voted. A majority of people, apparently, if we're to believe it or not, that's a separate topic. But majority of the people voted for Assad. And then you start digging into it a little bit, saying, okay, all right, this is one of the topics where if you say anything positive about what Assad does, people jump on you. People attack you. They're like, oh my God, you're a supporter of dictators. So that immediately should be a catalyst for people to pique their interest and say, why is this a forbidden topic for me? Why is this a forbidden opinion for me? Then what you realize is when you start looking at videos and you start scrubbing through the internet and you see, okay, hold on a second. These moderate rebels that the U.S. are talking about, when they don't want Assad to airstrike them, they round up Christians, they round up nuns, they put them in cages in the back of their pickup truck, and they drive around town. So wait, hold on a second. They know that that Assad will never hit them when they're wandering around with innocents in the cage behind them. So what does that mean? That means that is this guy as brutal as the West is saying? Then you look at in Germany and I think it was Italy and all these other countries. It's like, well, hold on a second. Why did they block Syrians in those countries from being able to vote in their election? They surrounded the embassies and prevented Syrians from being able to vote. Wow. And then you scrub the internet and you look for the reaction from the Syrian community, and you find that, hold on a second, there were Syrians protesting, holding up Assad signs. I thought they were refugees escaping the Assad regime. And then you dig a little bit more and you talk to some of them and they say, no, we're fleeing the rebels who are coming in and forcing us to live under Sharia law. And many of these rebels, by the way, are coming from Xinjiang. So it all ties back in together, where the evidence is there out on the internet, or even just talking to people. Find a Syrian and talk to them. I mean, I'm sure you can find anti-Assad Syrians as well, especially if they're funded by the U.S. government. Sure. But I mean, people have to ask questions. Now, the thing is, though, if you look at what we're doing and you look at what I do and how much time I spend on this, cutting through the propaganda and cutting through the BS is almost like a full-time job. People don't have that kind of time.
You still have a brewery to run, man.
Yeah. People don't have that kind of time to really figure out.
It's true.
What lies the mainstream media are telling.
It's true. I mean, people have to work 12 hours a day. I mean, doesn't have time to look for things and read and have access. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I grew up in Brazil watching U.S. movies and dreaming about living in the U.S. until I was like 15, 16 years old. Suddenly, I decided to study history, to do my major in history. wow. Then I start to realize.
I saw a funny picture that somebody posted on Twitter today, where it's like the body underneath, and then it's like the spirit of the body coming out. And he titled it. He said, "The anti-communism leaving my body as I start learning about the CIA." It was so good.
Exactly.
I mean, that's like the boogeyman word, right? It's
Yeah,
like, that's the
yeah.
other thing, you commie or whatever, you know? Let's take a look at some of the questions here. So, does the CIA sponsor Uyghurs? Yes, they do. They spent in the last 9 years, they spent $9 million on Uyghur activist groups. And all of them are anti-China, of course. They're not going to sponsor Uyghur groups that are saying, okay, hold on, guys, there actually is a Salafist Islamist problem that we're dealing with. No, that doesn't get funded by the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, which is the regime change arm of the U.S. government. Its founder, one of its founders, Carl Gershman, says what the CIA used to do covertly,
Yes.
they now do through the NED.
Yeah.
The terrorist groups in Syria are funded and sponsored by the CIA. Now, so what's interesting too is I just found out, I just uncovered, I think it was yesterday, the World Uyghur Congress, which is also funded by the U.S. government, was trying to send funds from Uyghurs who escaped from a Thai prison, who are now who were then in Malaysia. And a lot of these people, they end up getting Turkish passports. They fly to Turkey. They're greeted by ISIS fighters at the airport, and then they're shuttled over to Syria to fight with them.
Wow.
So there definitely is a network going on there.
Wow.
ETIM is a terrorist organization that was delisted by the U.S. as a terrorist organization.
In the same week?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
go for
Same few days before or after.
Yeah.
Cuba was listed as a state
terrorist,
supporting
yeah, exactly.
organization.
Like in the same
forced labor or slave labor or something like that, because they send doctors around the world to treat
Yeah,
people.
it's human smuggling.
So human smuggling, yeah. There's tons of sponsorship going on, and the ETIM delisting is a definite red flag that you need to be looking at. The dangers of U.S. KM Wong says the dangers of U.S. movies and series are glorifying the U.S. might. It looks harmless, but the impact is enormous on all layers of society. Absolutely,
Agreed.
agree. So Nadir Ait said Syria was the breaking point for him that opened his eyes. You know, I mean, this is exactly what should happen. They can only do so much of this before you're like, hold on a second. Like, this is getting really ridiculous. Is China pro Taliban? This is something I'm looking into a little bit more. I'm not exactly sure. I think, as far as I can see, the Taliban is interested only in its internal territory in Afghanistan, from what I've seen so far. If you look at the other groups fighting for power there, Al-Qaeda and ISIS and these kinds of groups, they are interested in spreading their ideology and acquiring territory across the board, which is why they're aligned with ETIM also, because they think that they can take Xinjiang and turn it into an Islamic state ruled by Sharia law. They say that directly in their ISIS propaganda videos. Taliban are sending text messages to ADF base commanders saying we're coming in. I'd imagine there's going to be a lot of retaliation going on from the Taliban, from towards people who worked together with America.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, I think there's a lot of unfortunate things that are going to be happening. Does China love India? That's a really general question. I think China, all I can say is China doesn't hate India like India seems to hate China. There seems to be a professional level of hate in India, but there's a lot of propaganda going on there. You see their ION News Network or WION, WION. I think that's what it's called.
No.
Super anti-China, and they do the most
Yeah.
ridiculous things. They did a piece on China going to space, saying China's going to colonize space. They're going to take all the resources from space, and it was like with really
Wow.
dark, suspense music in the background.
Wow.
Like, and they were even saying like China's doing all this stuff before America is. It's like India's cheering for America instead of their neighbors. Forgetting that India and China used to be the global superpowers of the world before they were crushed by imperial powers, deindustrialized and smashed back down. It's the weirdest thing to see them siding with the U.S. like this. All right, let's see what else. China, the majority of anti-communists are mostly fascists. There was a really good post I liked on Twitter where one guy said, people are always, fascists are always saying better better dead than red. And then they're crying as the victims of communism after we take them up on the offer. Here's Sarah's comment. No wonder a lot of people are concerned with Angelina Jolie showing sympathy to third world countries. Absolutely. There's a really, I don't know if you saw that video. I posted it multiple times where she went to Iraq, and this town was totally destroyed by fighting, and she was literally saying you can smell the bodies that are buried beneath this rubble, and then she finished off by saying, "But at least they're free now." It's like,
wow.
is your understanding of freedom so superficial that you're literally saying you're smelling bodies under this rubble, and you're saying, well, at least they're free now.
As in,
Like-
you're dead and you're free.
Yeah. I mean, there are other people who are still there, but that's their family members who are under this rubble. And there's no calculation about, okay, we set out to do this. I mean, Libya is a perfect example, too. We set out to get rid of Gaddafi. What was Libya like while Gaddafi was in power versus what was it like afterwards?
Absolutely.
There's no reconciliation process where people suddenly start saying, maybe we're not really good at this liberating thing. You know, maybe we should just get out of this business for now. There's a lot of vested interest in that as well, including the military-industrial complex. So WION, yeah, the VED.
It's funded by RSS.
I imagine so.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
RSS
yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know this organization, RSS? This is, wow. They're like 100 years old. They were inspired by the Nazis. They are the one who actually control BJP. I mean, they are the cadres of the extreme right. But they are huge. They have 18,000 teachers.
Just
In
teachers.
schools. They are.
Their social media force.
Yeah.
I had one of their
masters of social media.
I had one of their IT groups come after me once, or like their cells, and they were like,
IT cell is how they call it their intelligence.
yeah, oh man, it was like non-stop. It was on the Tibet issue. They were really, it was a fascinating experience, and it was non-stop.
Yeah.
And they try to mass report accounts also to get to I lost my train of thought here. Yeah, they mass report accounts to try to get you removed off social media, and they're quite often very successful. But I've had quite a few groups come after me. I had that group come after me from India. I also had a Hong Kong protester group with 17,000 users.
Mm-hmm.
They did a mass campaign to try to get me removed from Twitter, and then they gave up and said they said that they can't get me. I'm a high level Wumao. And that's exactly where this name came from.
Oh, this is from?
That's where that came from that group. Let me see if I can bring it up too. High level Wumao.
So you just owned it.
And oh yeah. I was like, you know what, guys? I actually kind of like that name. So I said, I'm gonna make a beer called High Level Wumao, and I just owned it.
By the way, is this one?
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe we'll switch gears a little bit for now, and talk a little bit about one of the programs that you were going to talk about. Was there a comment that came up that you wanted to?
The panda is so cute. I want that
It
cup.
is. It is.
So
I love pandas in use in China as well.
Yeah. You know, you can't. I actually try to register it in China, but Wumao, I don't think from what I've seen so far, you can't register it in China because it's like a
it's a
political derogatory
yeah.
term. They got to learn. You can turn this around. You know, you can own it. But so switching gears, one of the topics we were going to talk about, and that you've gone into in some depth, is the poverty alleviation programs. You actually went to go out and see some of the effects of it firsthand, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing interesting, you were just saying it's so hard. Like you spend, I don't know, every waking second trying to get through the crap just to bring in a little bit of information. I guess for us, it's like a complementary work is just to try to offer like just the facts, the stories, the kinds of things, like cut through all the crap and do it. I think that's what News on China has been trying to do.
Right.
And one of the things, actually, because both Marco and I are researchers with Tricontinental, the Institute for Social Research. Oh, oh God, this is good.
Beautiful.
So wait, can we describe what this is first before we go into poverty?
Oh, we're doing a
alleviation?
New England IPA now.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Cheers.
Cheers. Hey.
So one of the things, I mean, I'm not sure outside of China, but at least, let's say, in Latin America, in Africa, and Asia, the places that we're most concerned about, you almost get radio silence when it comes to poverty alleviation. If you're living in China, it's like every day, everything is poverty alleviation. It's almost, like the word we like to use, parallel universes.
Yeah.
But one of the reality is the country of 1.4 billion announces at the end of last year that it's eliminated extreme poverty at the same time where we're seeing at least 70 million people falling into extreme poverty, like in sub-Saharan Africa, in South Asia principally, but obviously in Latin America
Because of
the
COVID,
pandemic.
yeah.
And so it's clearly a huge issue for people to know about. And it almost feels like feels like living here, there's a responsibility to share that
Right.
information.
Do you mind if I interject one thing
Yeah,
that
sure.
usually critics always say, is they say, well, no, they didn't actually really meaningfully increase the quality of life for these people. They just lowered the level to classify people as poverty.
I mean, there's kind of, I would say, 3 points responding to that, because that is a coffin. Okay, first of all, if we use World Bank standards, World Bank is not necessarily our friend, so that's kind of rough. They do $1.9 per day, US dollars, is the standard internationally recognized line. Okay, China uses 2.3. It's a bit higher. Obviously, we recognize $2.3 per day isn't a huge amount. We have to recognize things like, what a dollar can buy here versus a dollar in the US. They're not the same. Okay, we get that point. But when you actually look,
And what a dollar can buy in Shanghai
it's
and in
different
Guizhou.
in the countryside in a poor province.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's that. But one of the things that's really fascinating, and Marco and I actually got to visit some places in Guizhou, is that the whole program isn't based on just the income. The income is just the first thing.
Self-sufficiency also.
Yes. So then they have this nice slogan, Chinese campaigns love slogans, which is that you get 2 no worries, which is you don't have to worry about food and clothing, and then 3 guarantees, which is housing that has electricity and safe water. You have education, free and compulsory education. Here it's 9 years.
Yeah.
But in some regions, like in Tibet, it's actually increased to 15 years.
15 years in Tibet.
And also increased during the poverty alleviation campaign to include university students coming from registered poor families. So it's much more expanded in some regions, especially in regions with non-Han ethnic majority. And then we have the third, which is basic health care. So when you actually include these 3 things, it's much more than actually just thinking about the income alone.
Right.
This is what's called, in UN type of terms, multi-dimensional poverty, which is something that is, we know, income distribution, and experiences in Brazil, which is one of the biggest, let's say, income distribution, poverty alleviation programs under the Workers' Party government. They didn't arrive at this level. They didn't get to figure out, okay, what are the root factors of poverty, and then how do you generate industry? How do you figure out, okay, in the countryside, bring production there so that people can start working there and gain income, develop a cooperative that can redistribute dividends to the countryside. Really fascinating when we actually got to see how it works on the base level. But beyond that, what I think is so
You look a bit Latina today.
I look like
Okay, I think we're online now.
Yeah? Great.
I think I wear it as a badge of honor.
I thought YouTube was
Okay, I think
YouTube doesn't like poverty alleviation stories.
Yes, no,
now
the West-
we know. You can't tell positive stories about China.
the West
Exactly.
doesn't at all.
No, you can beat US, but you can't tell positive things about China.
Yeah, sorry, we got disconnected there for a second, guys. So, but just to, you can continue in a second, but to back it up a little bit, when people think about the $1.9 per day in different places, they're thinking of it from the perspective of that needing to meet your basic needs, to have to spend that to acquire your basic needs. But here in China, because they were including so many different other things, they didn't need to have such a high requirement.
Yeah.
Your basic human needs, your shelter, your food, your medication, your education is all included. You're not going to have to spend your, whatever it is you get every day on that. And I know that some of the poverty alleviation officers, they would go into these villages and they would teach people, okay, how to raise your cattle. If you're, if one of your animals is sick, what to do. If your house needs repairing, what to do. All these different All right, let's try this now. Yeah, I saw one of those comments. It says CIA, please
Yeah.
stop messing
There's
with
another
it.
one, CIA interference.
Yeah,
Wow, this is interesting.
yeah. So it's where as soon as we get to the poverty alleviation, but so this Indian researcher I was talking about just before we got disconnected, he said, okay, if we look at the policies like the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, all this stuff, and you take some of the larger estimates of the death toll, for example, the famine, and some of the death toll from the famine is in the 30 million range, and he says, okay, but now if you take that information, if you take 30 million people died, if we just take that for face value, that a lot of people say that's inflated, but whatever, if we take that for face value, and you say that those changes in society, that reset, that great reset, that put people in a position where they had all their basic needs. They had a little plot of land. They had all this stuff. They had basic social services. If you compare that up against India, who after the post-colonial era had a very similar population and economy to China, and you calculate the deaths specifically related to Indians not having access to basic needs like the Chinese do, that's a direct result of those policies, every 7 years you had 30 million people dying. From not having those reforms during the most extreme period. So it's a lot about perspective. So the story of was it just that the dollar value is reduced? No, let's take a step back and look at the perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. And there's also often a comparison, especially during let's say the early socialist period under Mao, and a comparison with India. I mean, one of the kind of core measures really is looking at average life expectancy, because average life expectancy, and it's a great friend of ours who's an economist, John Ross, always talks about, is that it's the perfect measure in terms of encapsulating all the positive and negative things that are happening. You have a measure of social life, economic life, environmental situation, and all those things combined to see how long people are living.
Income is not enough.
Income is not enough. But during that period, even with the Great Leap Forward, even with the Cultural Revolution and difficult periods that was happening, in the 29-year period, the average life of a Chinese person increased 32 years. way above, like several years more than India, which was going in
And this
economic
happened
growth.
during those early, like a lot of
from
people,
Exactly.
49 to 78.
because a lot of
Right.
people like to say it's capitalism that saved China. It was post Deng
Yeah.
Xiaoping, but
Yeah.
all of these increases happened during that
Yeah.
early period.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine for every year of the revolution, you add more than 1 year into a person's life. So by the time the end of the Mao period, people are more than doubled their lifespan.
How
I
much?
mean,
How much was the life expectancy in 49?
it was
41 years old, something like this.
I think it was less than that.
Less than that.
Yes.
So imagine somebody who was born in 1949. They were supposed to be dead in like 1989. But this person who was born in 1949, actually, this person lived until when? Like, I mean, a few years ago.
I mean,
Because
we actually,
that was the whole period where the life expectancy was I think was 41 years old and got until like 73, 70 something years old in the period of 30 something years.
I mean, we actually start this with a story because people always think about, okay, because there's a small percentage, but still a percentage of people who had to be relocated. And that's always a question. Oh, people were forced out of their homes, out of the land to be able to move. Just to clarify, it's 10% of people, like people who are living in like edges of cliffs, places that aren't, it's not possible to bring industry there. It's not possible to bring in the roads and infrastructure and everything to go there. So there is a grouping of people that moved. And we talked to this, I mean, we didn't talk to her directly because she's quite elderly, but she's an 86-year-old grandmother in a small village. And she was one of the families that said, we don't want to move. She had reasons because she's like, she has Alzheimer's, 86 years old. But when you actually look at her pace of her, like her, what history she's lived, she was just a teenager in 1949. And the house she actually lives in is during the land reform period,
Yeah.
where a landlord's house was actually taken, like when you were, and given to 3 poor families. She inherited that. And so it comes now to this period, she's like, I'm 86 years old, I don't want to live, I don't want to move to the city, I
Right.
can't. I've never even seen a city, I've never seen a street, like, you go there, and literally the CPC members, like in the community, actually have to teach elders how to like cross a street. That's one of the classes they give,
Yeah.
is holding people's hands to figure, okay, this is, what is it, a zebra crossing?
Wow.
How
Yeah.
do you do that? How do you ride they have
What is the name of the-
6 firsts. How do you ride an elevator? How do you cross the street? This is like an official program in there
Right.
to help.
Yeah, kids from high school,
Yeah.
they teach the
They
elders.
get to be volunteer
Yeah, it's
grandchildren.
amazing.
Oh, that's an
Yeah,
awesome
amazing.
thing too, to like teach the younger generation
Yeah, yeah.
about caring for society.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so exactly. So and then you do more advanced things like go to the supermarket.
Yeah,
Because
you
you
use
have to- you have to
WeChat to pay, Weixin to pay.
I would love for like my kids to have that opportunity
Right.
to teach,
Exactly.
and participate in society like that.
I think there's one aspect that you always say this. I think it's one of the things of the study which is very interesting. It's about the organization aspect, right?
Yeah, no, I mean the thing is, this only happens like we got to visit one of these houses because we went to with one of these like local cadres that was one of these people were sent to live for years at a time. There's 3 million people sent
Yeah.
to live in these conditions, and basically saying you don't leave until
So wait,
every-
3 million people were sent
To
by
the
the
countrys-
party to the countryside to live with the people to.
But literally, it was like going, knocking on every door and figuring out what is the condition here. Is this a registered poor family? Is it not? What is the income sources? What is everything? But it's not just the official that decides. What's interesting is that, someone sent money.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Singapore. Thank you to Akim. Yeah,
Akim.
and I'll get to your question in a second. Just say in 1986. He's asking about Kaiser Kuo.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyways, sorry. Continue. Yeah.
Just wrapping up this point is that, so they sent to the countryside to live there until every, it's like not, it's really mundane stuff. Like we were going around walking with him to what is daily routine, including talking to this lady. He has to go there pretty much every week saying, how's the house? Okay, how is the running water going? Now there's like Wi-Fi, there's a satellite dish, they put in hot water heating in for the water, they put plumbing because they're like, you're not going to move, we have to make sure you still have the 3 guarantees, which is your housing is safe,
Yeah.
there's running water, there's electricity, there is, if you have kids, they're going to school, and then you have healthcare. So the kind of level of the details that you get to in the grassroots level is really impressive. And it's not just officials that make the decision. They have these things called like democratic appraisals, where your neighbors and your community members all have to come in and basically vote to see if, okay, this person next door, is he still poor? Has he Is he no longer poor? Is he hiding money under his bed? Does he actually have three goats
he has-
that he didn't tell
yeah,
about?
exactly.
You know? Is his kid sending him more money than he's reporting? Like,
Yeah.
it's a whole democratic system in the base level because obviously you can't arrive in as official. And
There
think
is
you can run
democracy in
the-
China,
run the-
folks. I'm sorry. There is democracy in
It's
China.
much different. It's
People-
actually more.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean that's interesting. I mean, to imagine that somebody needs to be taught the basic requirements of crossing a street and using an elevator. You know, it reminds me of like watching Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure when they bring Genghis Khan to the future, and it's like, oh, this is cool. Let's see how he reacts to all this new stuff. Or you take Crocodile Dundee to New York City, and he's like, "What's a bidet?" You know, but that's like acting. This is real life. Like you're taking somebody out of a situation where they've never seen a modern society before. That
Exactly.
must be an amazing thing to witness as well.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing that it's funny because if you think of the show we're doing right now, starting like doing the criticism and seeing all the terrible stuff that Global South has been submitted by the Western powers in the last 400 years. So, I mean, this is critical. We need to know all this stuff. But one thing about being leftist and live in China is that, I mean, we've learned so much about, how to deal with these problems. Because I think one of the greatest lessons that China is bringing to the world, like poverty alleviation program, I mean, the level of sophistication
Yeah.
Of organization.
Because it's not like, okay, there's like few guys here on the top
And a huge bunch of money being
exactly
thrown at
they
the problem.
decide, and okay, a lot of money, let's get rid of the poverty. No, you need to mobilization millions of people in the society to do that. How you do that? I mean, the level of the guy who goes to the village and live there for 3 years.
Gotta gain respect too of the villagers.
Exactly.
No, like, who are you? You know
Ex-
me. You don't speak my dialect. Why should I trust you?
Exactly. So
It's
I
like,
mean, one interesting thing is that you see how much there's so many solutions for big problems of the humankind that China is experimenting. I mean, this is one of the things. I mean, things can talk better about the design of the
Oh,
thing,
the design.
the construction, because this is what you wanna.
Okay, I'll talk about it. No, one of the things is, we're interested in the question of socialist construction is, so we did these, it's hard to show because people
Yeah.
can't see it. It's the idea that, what is socialist construction? It's trial and error, it's learning, it's about planning, it's about building, meeting the concrete needs of people, and then experimenting. So that's why, I also studied
the
architecture.
drawings. Yeah, it's about the drawings. But anyway, I think what is that's for us. This is a global South issue, and there's a lot of solutions that China is experimenting, and with problems, with contradictions, with mistakes. But this is, I think, it's something that it's fascinating about Chinese way of doing things. They test. I mean, how many things that they have a program? They start in 1 or 2 provinces.
Right.
They do for 2 years. Then they go back, say, okay, what go wrong? What is good? And then they go and do nationally. So, I mean, this kind of like social engineering.
Yeah.
As a professor from Brazil, Elias Jabbour, as a specialist in China, he has created this concepts like China is developing like a very sophisticated social engineering to deal with problems
Right.
of the global South. So this is something that I think it's a pity. I mean, that at this point, this kind of things.
It's not. Yeah, it's not only that the West is unwilling to learn from China about how to deal with impoverished communities. They're actually censoring people from learning about it, like when they censor the PBS, documentary.
Exactly.
And I think this is the kind of thing where I begin to understand a little bit about why China would be reluctant to open up to Western media too much. Because when they come here, they're not actually coming here to make an honest story.
Yeah.
They're coming to look for, because just like you said, in these programs, they'll make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's what they're looking for when Western media comes for.
Exactly.
They're
Oh, you
looking
see,
for that one
They screw up.
single mistake
Yeah.
and then to represent it to the world. So they're gonna say, okay, you don't want to pay attention to what we're doing. You want to think that we're hiding something from you. You want to think that we're doing something really bad. As the living conditions of our poorest citizens are increasing, their life expectancies are increasing, their access to education is increasing, That's your own choice. You can be ignorant, but we're not going to let you come in and do this kind of stuff. And it kind of, I was reading up. One of my friends is half Iraqi, and she was telling me stories of, the propaganda against Muslim countries and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things when I was kind of researching and investigating Iraq a little bit more was during the weapons of mass destruction kind of investigations and stuff like that.
The non-existing
inspectors
weapons.
inspectors did go in. Inspectors did go in and they didn't find anything, and that made no difference. So if inspectors go into Xinjiang, and there were people that went in anyways, let's forget that for a second. People always say, oh, they don't let anybody in. They do, but let's pretend that's true. What good is it? Like, they still went in, they still destroyed Iraq, and they hung Saddam Hussein.
Still Colin Powell went to the United Nations and say, okay, we found anthrax.
Yeah, but there's also a national security element as well. If you look at when Saddam Hussein was being more vague about whether he had weapons of mass destruction or not, or had the capability to make them, there was an incentive to keep it vague, because if Iran, who they had conflicts with, all of a sudden knew that he was completely bluffing and he had absolutely no defense systems, well, that's not good to know too. A country should have the right to be able to bluff about it. So what if we have it? You also have it, right? And so when you take that into consideration and you think about the Salafist Islamist groups that are trying to take over Xinjiang, trying to infiltrate Xinjiang, looking for any sort of angle that can be utilized, you kind of start to understand that perhaps there's a national security element at play here as well, in terms of, but again, I'm talking in theoreticals because they did let people in. Vladimir Voronkov, the head of the counterterrorism of the UN, came in and commended China for what they were doing, and everybody just blasted him because they don't want to hear anything positive. So when you're looking in from the outside and you're seeing this, saying, okay, we let people in. If they leave saying something positive, they're going to make sure that his story doesn't get out. And they're only going to publish the ones who come in and they find something that might be a legitimate mistake we made. And represent it as the entire premise for the program.
Actually, I have an anecdote about this. This last week I was at another bar. Not that I go to bars like all the time or anything, but it's,
just at night.
But it's interesting. It's actually to dispel some myths in the chat. It's a fellow Hong Konger, because I'm from Hong Kong, who owned this bar for 25 years in Shanghai. Total character. But he in that area, because he's in that kind of French concession area, so there's a lot of international people. And so he was saying that, he used to have lots of journalists, working for foreign media, obviously before many of them left last year, with this very question about what do we do. So he had met this one guy who was a frequenter. He lived in China for 6 years. He's Swiss, but worked for a German media company. And then when he was just about to leave, he went there for like a goodbye party or something. And so the bar owner, he comes and tells him, you've only written negative stories about China for 6 years. Do you really, honest to your heart, think that your 6 years in China have only brought negative stories to you? You have not experienced anything positive with China? He's like, it's true, I have many positive experiences in China. But he's like, you've written 0 stories about those positive experiences. It's like, even if I wanted to, my boss back in Germany won't let me publish them. So that's just the reality.
Absolutely.
That's the free press.
Imagine 6 years of covering China, and you've only covered negative stories because that's what you are.
Absolutely. There was somebody who left a comment on a video when I ripped apart kind of BBC, and he said that, I forget which program it was. It was a BBC program, Panorama, I think it was, or something like that. They contacted him. He lived in Hangzhou, and he did some videos and blogging about his experience during the coronavirus lockdowns. And they said they want to reach out to him to ask him more. They said, yeah, sure, what do you want to know? And then they started asking questions like, okay, well, how draconian were the, all of this stuff, like all negative questions. But when he was when he responded with, so many positive things to say about the thing and how much he appreciated the efforts of the officials and what everybody went through, never heard from him again. He never heard from BBC again. They don't want to cover that. And I highlighted that in my video where I showed that when they are interviewing somebody who is spouting the mainstream media narrative, who's in line with the West's narrative on China, they will not be critical of them at all. They'll ask them meaningful questions about their work. They'll say, okay, so how, and they'll treat them with respect. They'll want to get their opinion. When they approach somebody who is saying anything that disagrees with the mainstream media narrative. The questions become like, how does it feel to be a tool of the Beijing Chinese Communist regime? You know,
like you now.
Yeah. These are like the questions they ask.
Yeah,
it's like, so you're not engaging me with respect, because
You're discredited immediately.
You just, this is not what you want to hear. And I carefully answered the questions in a way that they wouldn't be able to get out of answering some of their own problems about how they covered Xinjiang. I said, can you let me know about this? Because you're obviously connected to the BBC. Can you let me know how this lie could have got through? And you haven't corrected it. And 4,000 people signed a petition asking you to address this. I'm really glad we have an open line of communication now. So can you just address this and we'll continue with the interview? Because it's relevant to what we're talking about as well. Not only did they not respond to me, they completely dropped me from the story. It was just too risky.
Whoa.
Anything that they quoted, I was very careful with how I crafted my answers. Anything they quoted from me would immediately implicate them. So like, okay, no, this guy's a shifty mofo. We're gonna get
free press. That's the free press.
Yeah. To quickly answer the question in the super chat that came through, Kaiser, I've listened to some of his stuff, and I feel like, I mean, he's an extremely intelligent guy, and some of his conclusions are confusing to me, where like he seems to consume a lot of the negative narrative about China, and I don't know how to reconcile that, because I don't think I'm any more smart than him, or I know any more about China than he does. We have access to the same information, but he just simply comes to a different conclusion than I come to. So it's a difficult thing to process. But I mean, everybody's free to their own opinion, right?
Sure.
Let's see if we've got some more questions. Daniel, you should get Jeffrey Sachs, or Chris Hedges, or Richard Wolf. I mean Jeffrey Sachs. You saw how he responded to the BBC. You know, that was, I love that. It's like, it's a segment about the environment, right? And so alongside Jeffrey Sachs, who's going to talk about environmental issues and cooperation, is somebody who escaped, a human rights lawyer or activist who escaped China. Which, by the way, you know, he escaped legally on his passport. He didn't like cross over a border legally. So immediately keep that in mind. This is how brutal the regime is in China, that these activists who are being hunted down by China can leave through China exit customs. They can hand their passport to a exit customs officer and they say, bon voyage, have a nice trip. So let's keep that in mind, first of all. But this is like, all of a sudden, when he wants to talk about the environment, the BBC host starts talking about Xinjiang and all this kind of stuff. And so Jeffrey Sachs obviously brings in the context of, well, let's equalize this then. We're talking about the relationship between America and China. So can we be fair here and talk about America's abuses as well? If we want to bring this into the conversation.
It's a long list.
Oh yeah. I mean, the BBC host is probably saying, "Sorry, we don't have time for that." That's kind of like Lord of the Rings series kind of level length stuff we're talking about here.
Season
15. But Jeffrey Sachs kept saying like, "This is bizarre," and it is. It's like, what does this guy have to do with the environment? Unless he's coming on to talk about the poor environmental practices of the concentration camps he was supposedly kept in, like maybe they dump wastewater into the rivers or something like that. Get the F out of here. Why do we want to hear? This is not the topic.
That's really...
Yeah. Bay Area 415, I've interviewed him before. He's really good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, my beer is not available for purchase in the U.S. You know, a lot of people. You know, it's interesting actually.
It's blocked. He was sanctioned by the U.S. No beer from Daniel can be bought in U.S.
I wouldn't be surprised. I have been covered on Voice of America. I mean, you know, the U.S.'s CIA propaganda outlet. I was featured on Voice of America, so I wouldn't be surprised. I'm being sanctioned next. But it's interesting because a lot of people, they try to imagine why I do what I do. They're like, oh, because he's got a business in China. And no, doing these videos takes away from my business. It takes away time from my business. And my beer is not available internationally. It's not even available nationally.
We can't even get in Shanghai.
No, they've got
You have to
to.
fly all the way to Shenzhen to drink the beer.
So
this is not a good business model.
He makes so many videos. We can get this beer in Shanghai, man.
And I never talk about my beer. My critics talk about my brewery more than I do. It's like I don't even want to mention what I do, and my critics are saying, "Oh, he owns." They're doing the advertising for me, and but it's got nothing to do with that. And actually, what's interesting too is a lot of these people who criticize me for supporting China to somehow benefit my business. Let me know how it's supposed to benefit my business, because that'd be great. Because this is clearly not. It's doing the opposite. It's taking away my time from my business. But a lot of these are the same people who say that Chinese people don't actually like their government. They want a democracy. They want to overthrow their government.
Oh, yeah.
So hold on a second here. By me supporting the Chinese government, shouldn't that actually affect my business negatively then? Shouldn't the local people say, we don't like this guy?
Exactly.
Everybody's
against the government.
We don't like our government. We want to, so this guy, don't go to his,
Yeah.
like,
Boycott taps.
I mean, these people have to, well, they're not using their brain. That's the problem.
I mean, this is so bullshit. I mean, I think we talked about this a few weeks ago. I mean, months ago, in here in the show. That was published by Washington Post. It was not published by Global Times or China Daily. But remember the
Study by York University.
York University of Canada did like a major research recently about the popularity of Communist Party of China in China, with like 600 researchers, like a sort of sophisticated kind of methodology. And this is in Washington Post. It's like 98% of people support the government.
Oh,
and then the year before was Harvard saying the same thing.
Harvard said the same, exactly.
And then there's a Canadian one as well.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah,
the University
I mean, what's the point, guys? I mean, I'm sorry. People here are not angry with the government.
Yeah.
They have criticism. Of course they have criticism. I mean, if you go to social media, this is another very interesting aspect in China, how much they pay attention to social media and how much they react to social media responses. Like, okay, they launch, I don't know, some sort of new program. They sometimes they got beaten up in social media, and they listen, and it's like, okay, let's discuss, let's listen to the people. So I mean, there's this myth in the Western that the Chinese government is authoritarian. If you disagree, they're
it's about to fall like in a second. It's about to fall. It's about to fall, and if you criticize the government, they'll put you in jail. I'm sorry, this is not true. I mean, all the time you see this. People react, people criticize, they go back, they rediscuss. They change things, even like what's happening now. Which is, by the way, maybe we do a next topic for a show here. What's they doing with the big tech in China? They are going after like everybody, Didi and Meituan and Tencent. They
for data privacy purposes.
Except for monopoly things, for private data, for everything. And if you go and see how, I mean, this is also part of the. People are complaining. Yeah. People like bar owners say, okay, so Meituan tells me if I choose them, I cannot be in
we've experienced that. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is
what is U.S. or any other actually Western countries doing to deal with big tech? Nothing.
Exactly.
But what's is interesting around the how media portrayals, just looping back to Cuba for a second, is that there was a lot of coverage around July 11th protests that were happening in some cities, saying it's anti-government because people have legitimate concerns. They're hungry and don't have medicine, etc. But what doesn't get covered is the response where tens of thousands of Cubans are going to the street to support.
And there's
I'm just saying this doesn't get covered.
And there's no word about sanctions. If you get all the coverage of right now in the Western media about Cuba, there is 0 words about sanctions. 0 words.
Oh yeah.
There's no food. Authoritarian. There's no food. There's no medicine. There's nothing about 60 years of economic blockade.
And so they talk about Cuba needing to punish the Cuban regime for not being able to supply the basic needs
that they
to their people that they don't allow or create massive issues for them to get.
Yeah.
While Americans don't even have a sanction on them and also cannot get the basic requirements to the lowest portion of the American population. Exactly. And they're not even contending with 6 decades of sanctions.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
They experienced 500,000 deaths.
So when media... So when we get these stories, I want to show you like
600,000
so this is like an extreme. So this is an extreme example of what actually does go on, anyways, in Western media. When Western media hires journalists, they are already advertising. They're already talking about what the requirements are. You need to be, and what they want them to cover. We need to cover the brutal Russian regime, and the biggest threat to our democracy. And it's like they're looking for people who already have the right mindset to cover it in a negative way. So now this is for Rebel News. So Rebel News is an extreme right wing. They're nutters, but they're basically just mainstream media on steroids. They say that they are unlike mainstream media, and they want to hold. They have the same thing. But so in their advertisement, they're hiring a China affairs reporter. Rebel News is seeking a China affairs journalist based anywhere in Canada, capable of providing news, commentary, and activism in relation to its editorial objectives. So first of all, they've got specific objectives. And the position will also be an advocate for democracy in China. Okay, so hold on a second. We're not talking about a reporter. We're talking about an activist. They're hiring an activist who is going to be presented to the public as a reporter doing reporting. But no, they're an activist with a position lined up with Rebel News' editorial objectives. And then they go into the regular stuff, like finding out how China's influence is affecting Canada and all of this kind of stuff. So you imagine somebody like that who's hired, and they're specifically an advocate for democracy in China. I'm that. Do you think they could ever effectively write an article about why Chinese people don't want a Western liberal democracy? Why do more than 95% support their government? Why is democracy, or a Western liberal democracy in their form of it, why is it a bad idea for China? Do you think they could ever meaningfully cover this topic? They can't, because they're going in saying, their whole premise is, I want to push our specific form of democracy onto China. Yeah. And so they say it in more black and white terms, but this is the same case across all of the major media outlets.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're agenda-driven activists. They're not actually journalists going out looking to investigate with an open mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. What other questions we got here? Yeah, when China hosted the Olympics, Tibet was the key issue. Nobody talks about Tibet now. Yeah, Tibet,
they're coming back again.
Yeah, they're going to, it's kind of in sleeper mode. During the Trump administration, they approved another $16 million for their government in exile. What they're waiting for, I think, is they're waiting for the Dalai Lama to die. That's basically it. Yeah. The Dalai Lama is way less extreme than his inner circle. And, he is saying things that are very inconvenient to the Western narrative. He says things like Tibet should not leave China. It should remain a part of China. He says things like the Panchen Lama, the boy he chose to be the Panchen Lama. He knows that he's safe. And he even said, well, actually, it's technically possible for there to be two Panchen Lamas. These are things that are very, very inconvenient. I also saw an article saying that he admitted, the Dalai Lama, at least from his point of view, this is his own words, said that when Xi Jinping visited India, he wanted to meet with Xi Jinping. And actually Xi Jinping was open to the idea. But it was the Indian government that pushed back against it and didn't want it to happen. So, and I think, personally, I think this is where China's making a little bit of a strategic mistake. I think they need to push more actively to say, okay, let's have a conversation with this guy. Back when he was working with Mao, before other people started undermining, they had a really good relationship. They came up with a 17-point agreement. He wrote a literal love letter to Mao.
And he was in charge, Dalai Lama was in charge of at the beginning, was in charge of the sort of the Ministry for Minority, ethnic minorities.
Yeah, he was in charge of the government. He was part of the government.
Yeah.
But there were so many people underneath him, undermining him. Now his brother, the second eldest brother, he admitted in his memoir that he regretted working with the CIA, because if the CIA got their way, it would have just turned into another Afghanistan, Iraq, or one of these places that the U.S. just completely destroys. But the problem is once the Dalai Lama is gone, all of this funding that's been going on, all of this stuff, they're gonna light a match. It's like fuel that has been let down. They're gonna light a match and they're gonna jump on this opportunity. Whoever replaces the Dalai Lama as the voice for Tibetans overseas is going to be way more extreme than him. And so my personal opinion, I mean, there may be other national security concerns that I'm not considering, but my personal opinion is China should be making more of an effort to talk to him, because he's way more moderate than anyone else around him, and that anyone who will replace him will ever be. So let's see. Yeah, the Dalai Lama. Yeah, so yes, the Dalai Lama did accept CIA money. I think he was getting like $160,000 a year. But still, that doesn't. He still, when you look at what he says, he's far more moderate than his inner circle. That is true. He was taking money directly from the CIA, and then his organization was as well. Dalai Lama, the feudal king. Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty troubled society before.
Was how much? 2% of
The wealth.
Yeah, one of the things we were looking at the schooling part. I mean, I mentioned a little bit about how the extension of the compulsory free education is that in 1949, 2% of Tibetans actually had access to school, because that was actually left to either the feudal or religious officials that could get to school. I mean, now
how much is now?
20. I don't. It's in the study. If we look in the study, we'll have it.
This is where a lot of the conflict comes in, and it's very easy to scream religious persecution. If there are people who truly believe that their position is right at the bottom because their religious leaders told them so, it's at what point does your own government need to start intervening in this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
You run into the same problem in Xinjiang. The Salafist Islamist forces wanted to force women to wear niqabs, full body coverings. This is not a part of Uyghur culture.
Yeah.
You had Uyghurs who were drinking because they've been making wine for 1,000 years, longer than Islam has even been a part of their community.
Exactly.
But these Salafist Islamist forces were persecuting Uyghurs who would drink. They wanted to, so, and this is under the guise of religious practices. At what point does the government in control of that region have to step in and say, no? No, as soon as you can have your religious beliefs, but as soon as it affects the quality of life or rights of other people, if it oppresses women, people's ability to make their own free choice, that's when we draw the line. I'm sorry. And it's so easy to turn that story into a story of religious persecution.
Absolutely.
When actually, the very people who are suffering under this, they want intervention. They're like, we don't want to do this. We want to continually. That's the real cultural genocide. Absolutely. Is when these forces come in and say, okay, no, there's no more drinking of alcohol. Yeah. Okay, we're going to introduce
women out of school,
niqab.
women out of universities. Yeah.
And an important thing for people to keep in mind also with the niqab ban is that Morocco, which is a 98% Muslim country, as a Muslim government, they have banned the manufacture and sale of niqabs as well, because they see it as an influence from the same Salafist Islamist groups that are responsible for terrorist attacks in Northern Africa. Yeah. But it's so much easier to target China, saying, whoa, hold on a second, you're not letting people wearing niqabs? That's not right, because you're not Muslim, and you're telling Muslim people that they can't do this. Completely leaving out the context that, once again, this was never part of Uyghur culture. And so I just posted something on my WeChat recently where I talked about the whole narrative about China is the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, where somebody comes and they see bullet holes in a barn, and then they draw the targets around them, to make it look like, wow, that's a clear shot. They reverse engineer the narrative, leaving out important context to make it look as nefarious as possible. Did you find that?
Yeah, it's just like, so Tibet was 2% of kids enrollment in schools in 1951. So today is 99.5%. That's the difference.
For the elementary school.
Yeah, for elementary school. And for middle school is 99.51. So, I mean, basically almost everybody is in the school right now in Tibet.
Right.
So that's the difference between Dalai Lama regime and
a lot of it is also vocational training is a big part of that as well, and that's gotten a bad word because people are associating vocational training with they've been taught to believe that it's concentration camps, but vocational training centers exist all around the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one of my wife's best friends. She comes over quite often to our place. Now, a lot of people who don't pass their high school entrance, they have a choice to go to vocational training colleges.
Absolutely.
For my wife's friend, she had the chance. She passed. She was a very good student, had the chance to go to high school. But back during that time, their family didn't have enough money. and they wanted to save it for, and this is the unfortunate part of how society worked back then, they wanted to save it for her younger brother. The boy, you know, let him go. So what she did instead was she went to a vocational training school because A, it's cheaper, and B, you learn for a less period of time. So you can learn to become a factory worker or whatever, or some sort of a specific skill. Now they've got baking programs and hairstylist. It's a far more robust.
They'll have chips, also.
Chips.
Oh,
chip
like
making.
Chip making
schools.
vocational school. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So now, luckily, unfortunately, she got divorced. She's a single mother now, but she managed to get a job in a factory in making chips, and then she worked her way up, where she's designing chips now. And so, these vocational training programs, it's not like it gets you into society, it gets you into the industries where you can still succeed. And she owns an apartment. I don't even own an apartment in Shenzhen. She owns an apartment in Bao'an district.
Are you bringing the?
No, I mean, I think one of the things is like vocational schools gets a bad name because, I mean, where's there not technical schools? I mean, like in Brazil, there's technical schools. I think there's kind of a mystified understanding about vocational schools. Except for here in China, there's a kind of much more intentional planning between what is needed by the industry, what is needed by different sectors of society, and matching that with specific training. Like right now, we're seeing with the chip schools, but across. But
we published an article like 2 weeks ago, right, about the new plan for vocational schools.
Absolutely.
They want to have 35 million people enroll in vocational schools, I think, until 2025.
Right.
Because it's like a huge country, it's a huge industry. It's 28% of the manufacture of the world right now. They need people to do many
in specific sectors.
Exactly.
三杯小那个4套，那个180毫升的。We got to refill. Sorry, guys. So now the difference though in Xinjiang and these regions is actually high school and the vocational training schools. They're all free. They're completely free. My friend, my wife's friend, who went to vocational training in Jiangxi, they had to pay for it. But in these other regions, in these minority regions where there's this push to lift them up and kind of, it's completely free. And so when you see, again, Texas sharpshooter fallacy kind of framing, when you see all of a sudden a massive spike in Xinjiang of people going to vocational training schools, they're like, wow, they're being forced to go into these camps. It's like, no, they're really good colleges and they're free.
Sure.
These people are gonna, and they don't have to. Some people, I don't know if it works the same way in Xinjiang, but if you do really, really poorly in elementary school, you don't pass to go to high school.
Sure.
You then can go to the vocational training route. So if it's the same thing in Xinjiang, or people who maybe just didn't go to school to begin with, they can go directly into these high quality vocational training schools. One of them, which was funded by the World Bank. And I drove by them. I drove by them when I was in Xinjiang. They're huge. They're really nice. They have massive sports fields in the back.
Wow.
It's a video that I didn't actually or I didn't release, but I've got lots of videos where I visited some of the coordinates that people said, oh, this is a concentration camp. Oh. And I even got to, let me know if you guys want me to release that video. I thought, because it's a weird situation. I got really kind of burnt out, and I'm like, is this really going to do any good? I visited, there was the one guy, Sean Zhang, he had some coordinates saying this is a concentration camp. So what I did was I went, and they actually let me in. I went in, and I filmed inside. It's completely empty. So it's empty. So they converted it into a COVID isolation place with, and they told me that what that was before was it was one of the high school vocational training centers. The alternative to high school. And I visited two of them. And so when I visited the second one, I was kind of skeptical about the narrative. I was like, okay, is this really was this one of these forced vocational kind of de-radicalization centers? And so I asked them after the second or third day. I said, okay, if you said that this was shut down because you built a newer one, which they kept saying, show me the newer one. And they said, sure. And they took me to the newer one, and it was beautiful. It was huge. It had sports fields in the back. People were coming and going.
Is that the one where you were doing the Red Rover? Was that the school?
Oh, no. That's just a regular elementary school. I didn't release the videos at all. And I was like, okay, so I mean, if people want to believe that those were indeed the re-education facilities for de-radicalization purposes, then and don't want to believe their story that it was just a regular vocational training store place, fine. That's fine. You can believe that, but then you also have to believe what China said then, that they're all closed now.
Sure.
Because they said those de-radicalization programs are closed. So if you really believe that that's what this center was, you can see firsthand that, well, it's gone now. Unless they hid everybody and emptied the building before I came, which is really unlikely.
You missed the super chat there.
Yeah, so they were talking about Vijay
yeah.
Prasad. If you want to flamethrower get Vijay Prasad, you know Vijay, don't you?
Well, yeah, of course. He's technically my boss.
because things do bad propaganda. You didn't say this is a tricontinental student, yeah?
I did,
So
more than one time.
He's part of your whole organization, right?
Yeah, he's actually my boss, the coolest one I've ever had.
Oh, he's so cool. I just posted one of his rants on Twitter where it was a short rant about the British.
I won't tell him you called it a rant.
About the British.
I call my own things rants, so don't take that the wrong
There
way.
was no Cold War. No Cold War.
Oh, it was so good.
Amazing.
Oh, it was so good.
Amazing.
We'll post a link maybe after that.
I knew you were associated with it somehow, but I didn't know it was that close.
It's our boss.
Yeah, it's our boss.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. He would love this beer, by the way.
I mean, I just hope he can come to China sometime.
He's in Canada right now, is he? Or?
No, he's in the U.S.
Oh, yes, okay.
He would be here for like 10 hours talking with us and having beer and
And no,
amazing
we are
stories.
not drinking Guinness.
No.
What are we drinking?
No,
People are saying
Guinness.
Guinness. I think we're offending
This is
Daniel here.
so good.
It's
an
really
Irish
good.
cream stout. So
Really
it's got a little
good.
bit of an Irish cream flavor. The alcohol's
It's
very
like
high.
Guys, you might disagree with Daniel politics. It's okay. It's your opinion, but the beer, it's just amazing. It's objective.
Yeah. No. See. Yeah. Some of my group here, they also call it rants. I call them rants. I don't use that in a negative way. But it was a beautiful speech by.
It was amazing.
By Vijay. Yeah. Coming to China at the end of the year, sure to visit my brew pub. Welcome, definitely welcome. I keep talking about doing there's a lot of people who are actually local. I keep talking about doing a subscriber meetup.
That sounds like fun.
Eventually, yeah. And some people said they'd even fly in from Beijing for it, so which would be kind of cool. I meet some people in the street sometimes who recognize me. The most interesting one was a courier delivery guy on his electric bike. I was heading out.
I think you published this, right? Or no?
I posted a picture about it. I took a picture with him. He rocked up, and he's like, you wouldn't, like a delivery guy, I mean, you just think he would not be interested in politics and all this kind of stuff. And that's probably my own fault for making that presumptuous, assumption. But yeah, he rocked up beside me. I was on my bike, he was on his, and he's like, you Daniel from Canada? In Chinese. I'm like, yeah? He's like, I'm your YouTube subscriber. I was like, what? I've had other people like walking around the streets and stuff like that, but that was the most surprising.
Wow, that's amazing.
You get this image. I mean, a lot of the delivery guys here, in their spare time, they play video games or something like that.
Yeah.
But to see this guy interested in politics and follows, and I asked him, because we were talking in Chinese, I said, but it's not, I speak English in my videos. He's like, yeah, he can, turn on the subtitles or something like that.
Oh, that's cool.
Or I think that's what he said. Yeah,
Automatic translation, maybe.
Yeah, or some yeah, and
are you in Bilibili also?
So I have one of my staff from here. They help just upload some of my videos to Bilibili, but I don't really focus on it.
Sure.
I don't check anything on there, and I don't. It would be like this kind of stuff. Pro China content. If you want to use a very superficial label for it, it's mostly pro truth, and but whatever. It would do really, really well on Bilibili and on Weibo. There would be a lot more people who know me.
Yeah.
But that's not my goal. Like I would rather reach 5% or even 1% of the amount of the audience, but they're an audience who disagrees with my position, or they're an audience that's under extreme anti-China propaganda. Sure. I'd rather do that. If this was about fame or fortune or something like that, I'd be all over. I'd be all over Bilibili and Weibo and stuff like that. which was why when Al Jazeera did a news piece on me, and they said, "Oh, these guys have millions of followers," and I was like, "No, I don't," and I specifically don't really care about those platforms because I would just be preaching to the choir.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think some people are saying that they want me to release that video. Where's my brewpub location? It's near Haiyue station in Shenzhen. The
Vijay is the best.
I agree. VJ is the best.
Oh, he's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I've never met him in person, but yeah.
Cheers to VJ.
Cheers.
And his rants.
Vijay.
Yeah. Oh, your YouTube is not in English. your computer.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's in Portuguese.
It's okay.
You can learn a few words. We can say at least one for Saúde.
We have
Saúde.
415 a ver agora.
You have to learn Saúde,
Ver
which
agora.
is cheers in Portuguese.
Saúde.
Saúde.
Oh, saúde.
Which means
Saúde.
health.
Health. Yeah.
I was actually kind of like pleasantly complimented by thinking that I was Brazilian. I think that's a compliment.
Oh, I mean,
I was saying
No.
just as our camera was coming back up, you've got a particularly Latina look today. I don't know if it's the big earrings or like a little bit of a Selena Gomez vibe going on, or who was the actress before? The famous.
I'm terrible with that.
Oh, what was her name?
Latina.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Forgot now.
She was in a lot of. She was really.
You mean
popular
Jennifer? No.
No. It's,
I don't think I look
it's
like
Salma
Jennifer
Hayek.
Lopez.
Salma
Hayek!
Yeah.
But she's Latina. I don't think she's Latina. She is.
Is she Spanish?
No, Hayek. It's not a.
No,
I
but
might have got it wrong.
she's-
I might have been thinking.
But
about
Selma
her.
but she's definitely a Spanish.
Does anybody in the
speaking-
audience know? Did I mess up on that one? Is she?
Where's Selma Hayek from?
Because Hayek is. Well, I mean, she can be from
Well,
Spain
of course,
or
the Latino and Asian, because there's
Oh,
the
yeah.
indigenous Latin
Selma-
American.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Indigenous people from America, they came from China, actually.
From Mexico? Mexico.
So,
Mexico.
yeah, Mexican
I
American.
thought so.
Okay, yeah.
What?
So,
Do you remember
Selma Hayek Pinot.
Yeah, some Hayek, yeah.
Yeah.
But you thought she wasn't. Latin.
I didn't know, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was a great Frida Kahlo,
Oh, it's true. It's true.
who was a communist
Yes.
beyond all else.
Yes.
We'll always
Did they
forget that.
mute that down a little bit in the movie?
Always about her. It's incredible. You know, because obviously she was sick for a lot of her life and, you know, had a full body cast and many things. And what was this thing? She was a painter drawing on her chest.
Yeah.
In her cast was hammer and sickle.
She's
She was
very-
like super communist.
very
Did they do that in the movie?
Of course not. I don't know.
No.
I mean, it's so.
That must be like that must be like the process in Hollywood. It's like we've got a really cool story.
Yeah.
You know, this is really interesting life story of this person. You're like, oh yeah, but what? They were communist.
Another one. Shit.
How do we? Maybe we can like kind of maneuver around that a little bit.
No, it's so crazy how much, I mean, talking about this, how much, I mean, this issue of China now, it's so, I mean, so similar what they're doing now. It's again, everybody now who speaks the truth is like, you're a Chinese spy. You're paid by Chinese government. You're paid by CPC. It's, I mean, they're turning this into a craziness, like the Cold War again. It's so crazy.
You know,
So
yeah,
crazy.
there are some environmental lawyers and researchers in Australia who are infuriated by the fact that the Australian government spent so much public funds on lobbying people against putting the Great Barrier Reef on a danger list by UNESCO. And the whole premise of fear-mongering beforehand was blaming China. Saying, oh, China's on the board of UNESCO and the UN and all these things, and they're gonna screw us over with this, and it had nothing to do with China. It had absolutely nothing to do with China. And the environmental minister of Australia actually said that UNESCO gave her a backroom promise that the vote wouldn't go in that direction. I say, well, hold on a second. This sounds really scandalous. And so finally, they overturned the vote and they went in Australia's direction because of their lobbying. So these environmental lawyers and these environmental activists, they are infuriated by this. But if they actually pick up on one of the central issues, that in order to manufacture consent from society, China was used as a fear-mongering tool.
Yeah.
And if you really care about Australian society, you need to address this issue, because they're going to use it again. It's not the last time they're going to use it. And next time, maybe they're going to use it for something far worse, like to justify actual invasions or war.
Yeah.
You really need to talk about this. But they won't touch that with a 10-foot pole, because they know if they say, you unfairly targeted China in this, they're going to be targeted, maybe even investigated by their government for being potentially, Communist Party connected,
Yeah.
There is a level of censorship that doesn't require the hard kind of censorship you have in China, that is far more brutal
Yeah.
in the West than it is here, and far more dangerous, because people in the West think that they have the full picture. People in the West think that they're free.
Yeah.
People in the West think the media is bringing them the full story, and they're coming to their own conclusions with their independent thoughts and ideas. Yeah. Whereas people in China, they understand that beyond the Great Firewall, there's another perspective. There's something else. A lot of them head out, they look at it, some of them are convinced by it, some of them aren't, but they at least are more self-aware.
Yeah.
In the West, we're completely unself-aware.
Exactly, absolutely.
We believe we're free and more educated and more aware of our surroundings than Chinese people, and it's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And that's far more dangerous.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she just went to Syria to get onto the BRI. I think China should be doing a lot more with Syria in terms of the anti-terrorism efforts as well, because there are a lot of people who left Xinjiang to go to Syria to destabilize that country. And it's an interesting thing that I pointed out on my Twitter recently, where I said that had these people been leaving Xinjiang and doing these terrorist attacks anywhere other than Syria, or at least in a Western allied country, even if the stories of what China was doing in Xinjiang were true, the leading narrative instead would have been China's not doing enough to control the export of terrorism.
Yeah, exactly.
China is an exporter of terrorism. They're allowing these people to leave and attack our countries and kill our children and our families and blow up our buildings. But fortunately for the West, these radicalized people are going to Syria and blowing up their thermal cooling towers and beheading the Christians there, or beheading the Muslims that don't pray on Fridays, as I said earlier. So, it's all okay. China, what are you doing? Why are you focusing on terrorism? This isn't an issue. Because the terrorism is going to Syria and other places, and they're killing people in Xinjiang. It has nothing to do with us, so shame on you.
Yeah.
But as soon as it became a problem for the West, if radicalized people from Xinjiang went to these other countries, they wouldn't care if it was like, so now they say it's 1 million. They wouldn't care if it was 3 million people in detention. And of course, that's a bullshit number to begin with. But even if it was 3 million, the leading narrative would ignore that number and just say, this is another nefarious Chinese export.
Yeah.
And that's what people need to realize.
Yeah. Somebody said that like a few minutes ago, like McCarthyism. Yeah, it's McCarthyism. McCarthyism?
McCarthyism.
McCarthyism.
Oh, McCarthyism. Yeah,
exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So somebody
one.
said that exactly
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
Yeah, McCarthyism. Yeah. DRXYZYX. So yeah, communism is like a dirty word in the West. That's right. So yeah, fighting against some people. They picked up on this, where it's they're going to Syria. They're fighting against the right people.
What they can't afford. I mean, we talked about this a few times. I think also in this our conversations. What Western can't afford is that China is becoming really an alternative for the global South. That's why. I mean, if you think, okay, it's a technology, and U.S. can't afford to be the number 2, but. It's true, but the thing is that clearly what's happening is that China is posing a threat to the Western, because China is becoming an alternative. I mean, there's
Challenging unipolarity.
Exactly. I mean, I think she's Italian for the name. I think Paola Subacchi, I think is her name. She's a professor at the University of London, and she's a specialist on these issues of international credit loan system. So World Bank, IMF, and China. So she just published a book. I think it's the Cost of Free Money, and she published an article in Nikkei and both Nikkei and Financial Times. It's very interesting what she said. This is like 2 months ago. She said, you know what? Since the 80s, everybody knows what IMF did in the whole world.
Yeah, IMF fundamentalism, as it's as Noam Chomsky calls it. Yeah,
exactly. So a country's broken. They come. They offer you offer billions of dollars and say,
more or less, they offer with lots of strings.
no. Exactly. This is what I'm saying. They offer you that they make an offer you can't refuse.
Yeah.
like Godfather. So okay, is it just $10 billion? You have to open your markets. You have to privatize your state companies. You have to destroy your labor rights. You have to do start measures, no more education,
and remove agricultural subsidies.
Exactly.
Which directly resulted in famines and mass deaths.
Exactly. Yeah. So this was from the 1980s until a few years ago. Now she said, you know what's happening right now? China is happening right now. China is now the biggest international lender of the world. 70% of the money that China is like hundreds of billions of dollars come from state banks.
70% of them.
70%. And she said it's more than IMF, more than World Bank,
or any other country.
Any other country in the Western. So she said, you know what's going on now? IMF, for the first time, of course, also because of pandemic, but she said because of pandemic and China, IMF just released like a $250 billion fund with, there's no comparison in terms of the conditions, totally flexible, no impositions of austerity, anything. She just said, because of China.
You know what? This is exactly what I said. I actually said before, people call me pro-China and stuff like that, but if the West beat China because they offered better options to the global South, I would be totally on board with that.
Let's see the Bring Back Better World.
You saw this thing?
No.
Yeah, you go for it.
No. But now, the G7 meeting, one of the things that was proposed is as a kind of BRI alternative in more or less these kinds of
more
words.
Transparent.
It's going to be
BRI.
it's a terrible, I don't know who was in that public campaign. Bring Back Better World is going to be their alternative for
BBBW.
B3W. Bring Back Better World.
Which is actually
it's not even grammatically correct. Actually.
This was Biden's campaign. Build back.
He probably came up with that himself.
Build back better. Exactly.
If you listen to the way he talks recently.
They made grand promises with zero plans. So let's just actually see. At the end of the day, can you actually make things happen? Can you put the money on the table? Can you make infrastructure get built?
Yeah.
It's been a long time since they've actually built anything. So.
But this is interesting. But even I think it's just a piece of propaganda. They said, we're gonna spend $40 trillion in infrastructure.
Who's gonna provide it?
Yeah, exactly, for the global South. But then they say, but what is the plan? Oh no, we're gonna present the plan next year, 2022, when Germany takes over the presidents of G7.
Yeah.
So, but that's the kind of thing. You see, if you think about the 50s, 60s, 70s, everything from welfare state in Europe, because the workers in Europe were also mobilizing. I'll say they gave some concessions. We had a welfare state in Europe. Global South had a problem under development. So there's hundreds of billions of dollars put in development of Global South. All of it because of what? Because of Soviet Union. Because there was an option. Okay, guys, if this is not good for us, we're gonna go with the Soviets. And there's something that started to happen a little bit similar, because either like the conditions of money, the credit in international credit, or infrastructure projects, everything. Okay, so what's the option?
Yeah, this is a natural result of having two options, where the other option has to scramble now and panic and say, okay, all right, we're going to have these better options for you now. And you have European countries all of a sudden coming out en masse, apologizing for their colonial era crimes. Saying, okay, yeah, we're sorry, yeah, come back, please. Like an abusive, husband telling his wife, I only did it because I loved you. you know, and please don't. I'm a new man, you know.
Yeah.
This kind of a feeling where it's this abusive partner who's saying, please don't leave. Now, if they come up with truly better options, which I'm skeptical about,
I don't believe.
you know, that you can't. They'll wait. And I mean, the lesson of what they were doing during the Soviet era also.
Yeah.
It's a temporary option until they can get far enough ahead again to be brutally monopolistic again.
Yeah.
But this is why I hope that if China does overtake them, that we get in a situation where we continue to have multiple partners.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want China to become the only option.
Yeah.
I think having two in the ecosystem would help. I don't believe if China overtook the U.S. in a very substantial way that they would turn into the same thing. It just doesn't seem to be a part of their personality.
It's not.
But I could be wrong. The safest option is to have two options on the table. For anybody who wants to smash China back down for the purposes of the U.S. being able to keep its monopoly over the world, I mean, they obviously haven't lived in these global South countries, or they don't really understand the issues at play.
Yeah.
I think you're right when you were talking about also the underlying issues are beyond just being able to say we're number one. You know, that's a superficial thing where China, America doesn't want to become number two. That's not really the real issue. They can play into it a bit because there's probably a lot of Americans that loved growing up saying we're number one, we're number one. You know, it's like USA, and they're saying, you know, they don't want these poor kids to grow up and say, oh shit, what do we say now? You know, so they can play into that. They can play into the nationalism aspect, but the real underlying truth is they still want to have monopolistic control over the resources in the global South. And the second issue is they want to maintain U.S. dollar global hegemony. The U.S. gains a lot of power from that, and they can't lose these two things.
Absolutely.
But the average person who enjoys... Okay, yeah. But the average...
Tim Buck is right. All the beer, no restroom trips.
But so those are the two real underlying issues. The global control over the resource-rich countries. Yeah. And the dollar hegemony. And the U.S. dollar. But the thing that's interesting is the people who just want to be able to cheer and say we're number one, they don't actually think that what the U.S. does with its global power and hegemony over the world doesn't actually benefit the average American.
No, it's not.
This is the fascinating thing.
That's the thing. Inequality is growing in the U.S. More poor than like 5 years ago, than 10 years ago.
If you were an average Joe and you wanted to smash China back down because America being number one will benefit you personally, even if you're fully aware it's at the expense of other people in third world countries, at least I could, that's a little bit more understandable from understanding
because you don't see around. You don't see around.
Understanding that there's a lot of human beings that are selfish. Yeah. At least you can comprehend that. Yeah. You can say, okay, I get it. You want to maintain your standard of living, and this is what you think you have to do. But actually, that's not the truth. Yeah. The people who benefit from these activities are a very small portion of the American population.
Absolutely. I mean, the inequality is growing so much in the U.S. and tens of millions of poor. But one thing interesting you said is about the dollar hegemony. This is another something that's this researcher, Paola Subaki, she was saying. Everybody discuss, of course, the huge infrastructure projects that China is funding through BRI. But there's one thing that China is doing, which is almost silent. Nobody pays attention, nobody discusses, but it's almost as effective and important as, which is this thing. It's like this currency swaps, this mechanism that countries can do, because the problem is that dollar is hegemonic. So for do international trade, everybody needs a dollar. Every country in the world, 2 countries, we get dollars and we exchange. But you have this mechanism, which is the so-called the currency swap, which means, okay, I'm China, you are Argentina, and okay, we don't want dollars. We're not going to use dollars, but yuans and pesos. So So I send to you, let's say we have a deal of $10 billion. I send to you equivalent in yuans, and you send to me in pesos. So now we both have each other currencies, and we can have trade without the dollar. this is something that China is doing more and more in the last years. The numbers are amazing. I mean, last year China did like 3 trillion yuan of currency swaps with many countries in the world, which means this is like $500 billion. The most interesting case is Argentina. Argentina right now the country is in a bad situation because they own to IMF $45 billion. This is for Argentina. It's incredible. What happened? So all the dollars they have extra, they have to pay the debt to the IMF. So the deal that China proposed last December to Argentina. Okay, let's do a currency swap. No dollars, just two of us here. $18.2 billion equivalent in yuan and pesos. So now China is buying, Argentina soy with pesos, and Argentina is buying, Chinese cell phones with yuan, without the dollar. And this is something that is doing like this. China is doing like this with
Iran,
Russia. Russia, let alone.
They've gotten rid of all their U.S. reserves now.
Exactly, completely.
Exactly, they just did that. And the China-Russia trade last year was 25% non-dollarized, and is the most advanced partnership right now. Mm-hmm. But this is something that China is like, nobody's saying is like doing like this.
Well, we're going to get in trouble for blowing the lid on this one. We're going to, I'm on CIA watch lists, so they're going to be like, oh. That is interesting. Currency swaps of the U.S. probably the number one most nefarious things, which keeps the dollar hegemonic position.
Mm-hmm. The thing is, that's the thing that it's not currency swaps for dollars because everybody has to buy dollars. So this is the unequal thing. You have to buy dollars, otherwise you don't do trade.
Right.
Unless you have big friends like China.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the thing is like, the important thing to understand is this isn't a nefarious plot to cut out the U.S. dollar. The U.S. actually incentivized alternatives. Now, they were the ones who weaponized their dollar, cut people out of the financial system who didn't align with them, with their geopolitical interests. Yeah. Walked away from the JCPOA Iran deal, and then punished European countries who wanted to continue to commit to the promise that they made to them. So even Europe was looking for an alternative at that point, and they released a payment system called Intex or Instex, which circumvented the U.S. Kind of controlled SWIFT system. Mm-hmm. So if they didn't do this, if they didn't continually weaponize the U.S. dollar. I mean, that's one of the reasons Mengwanzhou's, the Huawei daughter is in Canada, stuck on house arrest also. If they didn't do this so rampantly, China wouldn't have to even look at this. Like,
absolutely.
Okay, we'll use the U.S. dollar.
Exactly.
But I can guarantee you, and we can look back at this video in the future, when it becomes a lot more obvious to everybody that China is trying to cut out the U.S. dollar now out of pure need to do it. It will be turned into a nefarious story about trying to destroy American, the American dollar or whatever it is.
Exactly.
That's coming. Coming.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. That's the alternative that now many countries in the world will have because they have China.
Yeah. U.S. definitely knows what China is doing with their intel, but its folly is to focus on the attention everywhere. America does have its attention everywhere. I almost wondered if them pulling out of Afghanistan was an attempt to refocus their attention on fewer targets, with China being a major one. I think they probably, when they pulled out, all of a sudden, these interesting talks that were happening between China and the Taliban and Russia and the Taliban, who were taking over the country very easily after they left, or after they announced it at least, America all of a sudden says, oh shit, this is going in the wrong direction. Afghanistan would have been a good control point for them to affect Russia and China from. And so that's why you see them going in and trying to bomb back the progress that these other forces are taking. But They definitely do, and I constantly hear people talking about this is the mistake that empires have always made that fell, is they became a little bit too overconfident in their capabilities and thought that they could just do everything. And it definitely seems like that's what the U.S. is doing
Now it's my time for a break.
right now.
Let me go.
Canada's not accepting new evidence in favor of Hmong. I haven't been following the Hmong One's case too much,
Me
but
neither, not enough.
But I do know that for quite a while now, they've refused to let Hmong's lawyers include evidence, important evidence. Let's see. What else we got here? In Indonesia, we had to use U.S. dollars for transactions.
Jokowi,
Yeah. Right, yeah. Don't need dollars. My U.S. cronies just printed 9 trillion. Yeah, willing to buy. Let's see if we've got any other interesting comments here. So we've got, how long, it doesn't say the time that we've been going on
It
for.
says
When did we start?
there. I can't read that far. My eyes are really bad.
Oh, wow, 2 hours.
It's been 2 hours?
Yeah, it flew by.
Why are people still watching? Is it that interesting?
Right, people are coming and going. Probably we were hovering around
Consistent.
400.
Exactly.
Yeah. So no, that's good. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you want, while Marco's upstairs, if you had any specific questions for us, we're specifically paying attention to the comments right now, so we could wrap up with some questions if you guys had anything you wanted to ask us. What do you guys think about the Wuhan lab leak theory? I mean, I think you could make a pretty compelling case to make it seem like it came from there, just as well as you could make a compelling case that it came from Fort Detrick. I don't share either of those stories, but it does seem like a lot of real researchers talking about its natural origin and all this kind of stuff do seem to be sidelined quite a lot by the mainstream media.
Yeah, I mean, Nature just published another article with the scientists coming out again saying we're saying exactly what we said last year.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, None OYB.
Grab a drink with this talk. Great afternoon.
Yeah.
I think people are underestimating our ability to drink. They think we're getting sloshed, but I'm
What is
sorry.
the current COVID situation like in China? So, there are cases that pop up here and there, and everything goes into like serious lockdown. Like there were a few cases that popped up in Shenzhen, and then all of a sudden, if I wanted to leave Shenzhen, I needed a negative COVID test within 48 hours of leaving the border, and I had a plan to do a big road trip around China. But every single city I went to required a COVID test within the last 48 hours, so it made it almost impossible. So I had to cancel my my travels. So they still take it very seriously, but there's only just a few cases here and there. What do you think about the WHO requesting a second investigation? I don't know. I haven't been following that too much. From what I have heard from some people, it seems to be more heavily politicized this time around. What else we got here? We got a few different questions coming in. Oh, yeah, so somebody said, Robert, Robert, I recognize you. You've been on my channel for quite a long time. Nice to see you here. Jiangsu apparently had 12 new cases yesterday.
Yeah.
I think it was in
Nanjing?
Nanjing, yeah.
Nanjing,
yeah. But I believe, Robert, you can correct if we're wrong. It's an international airport there, and they were people who were in quarantine, though. They weren't 12 cases that were found out in the streets, but correct me if I'm incorrect.
I think workers of the airport, maybe.
Yeah, I know Shenzhen had the airport workers and everything shut down in there for a while. But yeah, I think we're gonna wrap this up soon. So if you guys,
2 hours. Did you know?
2 hours already?
Yeah.
it really flew
We
by.
definitely captured some of the vibe.
Yeah, so Robert says yes, they were quarantined international travelers coming in. What would be a great book and material to read which is not anti-China? You know what is really good is the China Mirage. China Mirage is really good, written by an American. His father apparently was one of the guys who was lifting the flag at Iwo Jima.
I've never read it.
Really?
Really awesome, unbiased book about China and how it's misunderstood and
interesting.
misunderstood. Yeah.
China Mirage.
And then the second best one for something a little bit more specifically political or geopolitical would be Kishore Mahbubani's Has China Won?
Definitely.
That's a really good book too.
And Martin Jakes, When China Rules the World.
I haven't read that one, but yeah, I know that should probably be a pretty good one. Is Chinese beer better than American beer? Well,
How do you?
so commercial beer is commercial beer. It's all crap if you're a craft beer drinker.
No judgment.
Both like Qingdao and Budweiser, and it's all like if you're a craft beer drinker, you'll say they're equally garbage. However, in terms of interesting breweries and the number of breweries doing interesting things, America, hands down. America is the best place in the world for
sure.
really good craft beer.
You see, guys, you're still number one in beer.
Yeah, craft
Don't
beer.
be upset.
The top spots for craft beer in America: San Diego, Portland, and in Colorado as well. Yeah, China Mirage by James Bradley. That's right. It's a very, very good book. The one question I would like clearly answered is: has there been
Vaping
validation
deaths?
of vaping deaths in the U.S.? Because
It's
they had
not
that.
a world I know much about.
So yeah, I mean, they were blaming a lot of this like mystery sickness on vaping deaths, and a lot of
be
people.
COVID.
That's what a lot of people are saying. I mean, I don't know. I don't have enough evidence of
Yeah,
it.
me neither.
I think it is unusual that those vaping deaths were only happening in the U.S. because there's a lot of people who vape in Canada. There's a lot of people who vape in Australia.
In China?
In China. So it does seem odd, but. I try to stay away from that conspiracy theory to a certain degree because it would seem, coming from somebody like me, agenda driven. It's like I want people to believe this, but I really don't know. I think for me to say that I really believe that that's a possibility or to push that idea is no different than people pushing the China Wuhan lab leak theory in my opinion. There's a supercomputer that compared vaping deaths and suggested possible COVID symptoms. I mean, I do think it is something that should be looked into. I think it's interesting that the Global Times on Twitter was temporarily suspended
For Dietrich vaping death.
for
Yes.
pushing
Yes.
they were pushing what was it called? A petition to get people to sign it to force an investigation into Fort Detrick.
Yeah.
And Twitter suspended them. I think they're back online now, though. But that tells you a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Is that we can, the West can say all they want. Let's go into China and figure out if they manufactured this thing under very hostile kind of pretenses, and it's no problem. But as soon as the Global Times wants to test out this American free speech concept and say, well, maybe we should investigate Fort Detrick. Gone.
Yeah.
This is a big question of mine too, Senzo. If the WHO will eventually investigate COVID origins in other countries other than China. Like they have medical records of cancer patients in it was Italy or Spain that showed they had the COVID antibody.
Yeah.
There's all these different things popping up.
As early as
Yeah.
September, I guess.
in sewage, and it's like,
Yeah.
if when these pieces of information come up, no matter how valid they are or not, if people were really interested in the truth, if the media was really interested in the truth, they would be pushing to say, let's investigate this. We should investigate this. Let's dig into this a bit more. But nobody does.
No.
Because they only want to hear that it came from one place. It's very similar to the Texas sharpshooter fallacy that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. They have a conclusion and they want to draw all their evidence around that. And but yeah, I think there should be there isn't an international environment of unbiasedness that would allow people to really take a more honest approach to this. Yeah, sewage in Spain, March 2019.
Oh, March actually. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right, we're gonna take about 3 more minutes. We're gonna go to 5:40, and then we're gonna close this up. So if you guys had any other questions, apologize for the video quality. We had a nice quality camera there that we couldn't connect to the computer for some reason, but let us know if you had any other questions you wanted us to wrap up with. I believe the WHO should investigate other leads. Totally agree.
Vaccines. Did you get yours?
Ooh.
You got both?
I got both. Sinopharm.
So I didn't get mine because I was planning on traveling and I wouldn't have had a chance to get it 4 weeks later. But now that
sure.
everything's been canceled, I could have actually got it. I'm going to Gansu next week, and when I come back, I'll probably.
You got two, right?
I got my 2 Sinovac.
Sinovac.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure Tings and Marco was okay first. And then after I saw
As a
that they were still okay,
not alligators, as the Brazilian president likes to say.
and B, they didn't develop some sort of an allergy towards alcohol, because that would be absolutely tragic for me.
We're the guinea pigs. We're okay, Daniel. We're still living to tell the tale, so.
Exactly. Yeah.
I hope people enjoyed this format. It's kind of new to me.
No, we keep like 400.
People come and go,
If
but
we
I mean,
were,
More fun.
usually if we do kind of like 10 a.m., 11 a.m. here, we get like crowds in
People-
North America as well.
Yeah,
That's
this time
why
is
people are
missing.
sleeping now.
Yeah. So usually on my live streams, I can get up to like 1,500
yeah.
pretty easily, and that was when my subscriber base was much lower.
Oh.
But it would be a little bit harder to explain drinking beer at 11 a.m. though.
can we do it at 11 p.m.?
We can do 11 p.m. and people
they
wake
get their
up in
morning?
America, in the United States.
That is true. That is true.
All right.
All right, well, we're going to start wrapping this up. Thank you, everybody who joined. I don't know how many of you sat
Wow.
through the entire thing.
We survive a live. I never.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And this was a little bit of a test. If you want to see more of this, definitely leave us a comment. Let us know. Other than that, the next time we're seen together, we're going to continue our News on China episodes.
Yeah.
Episodes, which maybe when are you heading back? When are you heading back to Shanghai?
Probably Monday morning.
Monday morning.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then potentially next week or the week after, we'll have another News on China episode for you. Thanks, everybody.
Amazing.
I've got to turn it
Thank
off
you.
over here.
Bye
And we'll see you
bye.
next time.
Cheers. Bye-bye.